Hi, this is Eddie Hearn, and you're watching Lights Out.
This is Lights Out. I am Faisal Khan, and this is the Lights Out Boxing podcast 29. And I've got a full house with me today. Delighted to be joined by the usual suspects, Luke, Anthony, Walsh, and Mohsin Gulsher. And delighted to be joined all the way from the Good Boxing Podcast. One of boxing's hardest workers today in the game is Joshua Saez. Joshua, thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure having you on our podcast today. And obviously to the other guys, always a pleasure and a privilege for you guys jumping on with us. Before we get started, we just want to let the people out there know, if they haven't already, to hit that subscribe button, like and comment. And we'll also be sharing the Good Boxing Podcast YouTube channel's link in our description, as well as their social media platforms. So guys, if you can, just make sure you give these guys a follow as well, because I'll say it from the bottom of my heart, Joshua Saez, he's a very hard-working guy, and he's always uploading some pretty good content, and he's pretty honest about everything he says. You know, he doesn't hold back. He goes in on his podcast and he covers literally everything. So guys, you know what to do. If you haven't already, make sure you give him a follow on his social media platforms, and of course don't forget to check out his YouTube channel as well. Right guys, let's begin today's podcast. We've got a few things to discuss, including Fury Joshua, a recap of Chocolatito versus Estrada, and of course the announcement that Liam Williams finally gets his shot at Demetrius Andrade's middleweight championship of the world. But today's podcast, we have to begin by paying tribute to Marvellous Marvin Hagler, who sadly passed away on Saturday night. Boxing has lost a true icon, a true legend. Real terrible news breaking through to us. Question goes to the panel. What was your favorite moment of Marvin Hagler during or even after his career?
I think ultimately his record speaks for itself. I mean, of 67 fights that he's had, 62 wins, 52 of them by way of knockout, only lost 3 times in his career. Of course, was former middleweight champion of the world, losing his title to Sugar Ray Leonard in 1987. And yeah, just some of the names he's taken on over the years is just, it's a who's who of boxing. You know, you've got Bobby Watts, you've got, you know, obviously Sugar Ray Leonard, as we've said, John Mugabe, Thomas Hearns, you know, the names go on. And, you know, to pardon the pun, his career was simply marvelous. It's one of those boxers I wish I was around to see it at the time.
Nicely put, Luke. Guys, what was your, most catchy moment of Marvellous Marvin Hagler's career?
You can go, buddy.
I mean, the fight I really rewatched, quite a few times now, is a fight with Alan Minter when he came to the UK and fought against him, and he won the middleweight titles. And I mean, Luke's pretty much kind of banged on, read out his credentials, what he achieved in the sport, the fights that he fought. He didn't duck anyone. He was one of those boxers, after he retired, he was in favor of kind of having one overall champion rather than different belts. He just was a fighter, and if I was to create my dream fighter, I would definitely have his granite chin. He'd only been dropped once in his career, I think it was. But the other moments, I'm going to let Joshua probably talk about that famous fight. But incredible. It's a sad loss to the boxing world and to his friends and family.
Absolutely. My favorite moment has to be round 6 with John the Beast Mugabe. What a sick fight that was. I recently just kind of touched upon that fight a few days ago. Actually, I was rewatching after the news broke. What a fight. He honestly was a textbook fighter. I mean, he was tough. He was gritty. He wasn't the biggest athlete, wasn't the strongest guy, but he worked hard. He was able to use his good boxing ability to kind of just beat down his opponents. He shifted. He had really, really technical boxing skills. He fought lefty, he fought righty, and he fought the best out there. He wasn't afraid of a challenge. He always tested himself. As you know, he fought Ray Leonard, he fought Thomas Hearns. I mean, John the Beast Mugabe, Roberto Duran, you name him, he fought him. So he's a real throwback fighter. And honestly, he wasn't a part of my era. I was way too young, but certainly one of the greats of all time. You have to arguably state that based on the talent he fought and some of the wars he had. So he's going to be missed, honestly. And I know I didn't grow up in that era, but I wish I did, because it must have been amazing to see those careers kind of unfold the way they did live. Similar to like how we watch now, 135, you have all that deep talent. Imagine watching all those guys fight in their prime against each other. It must have been just phenomenal, honestly.
Well, I second that. I wish I was around in his era. A massive iconic figure in the sport. You know, a legend, one of the greatest of all times. Favorite moment for me will always be that fight with Thomas Hearns. But you know, I wish I could have been around it, not only just to have witnessed his career, but also the Hagler, Hearns, Leonard, you know, Duran era. A tremendous fighter, and it's a sad loss to the boxing world. And our thoughts, prayers, and condolences go out to him and his family. And yeah, I think the boxing world will be mourning for a very long time, because it's a tragic loss to what was a great figure in the sport.
That's why I just want to add that fight you talk about, Hagler Hearns. I mean, that was voted as fight of the century, or you know, up there. But it was only 3 rounds, so that says it all. You know, that was a grueling fight. You know, 3 rounds of pure action, back and forth. It was just pure hatred for each other, and you know, that epitomized, you know, him as a fighter, as a professional, someone who kept himself in top shape, never blew up in weight, always training. Yeah, you know,
a true professional at all times. Let's move on, guys. Obviously, you know, we've received quite a bit of positive news yesterday. I know you guys are all just as excited as I am with the news we've received, but you know, moving forward a day later, we might have calmed down with our excitement. Contracts have been signed for a 2-fight deal between Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury for an all undisputed heavyweight championship clash, according to Eddie Hearn, ESPN, and of course Frank Warren, if you've listened to his interview with TalkSport earlier on this morning. It's going in the right direction. Now, I've always said that I don't believe a fight is happening until the first bell has been rung. So there's positives to take. You know, watched a few interviews today with certain people. You know, some people think it's still not happening. Some people think it's 100% happening. Listen, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but the bottom line is, it is going in the right direction. As for dates, venues, that's still yet to be confirmed. But what we do know is they've both signed on the dotted line to fight each other. So like I said, you know, this has got a lot further than Joshua Wilder ever did. And at the time, that was seen as the undisputed clash. So we've got to give it some credit. They are doing the right things, and these rival promotions are starting to work together. But the question we've really got to ask ourselves is, guys, is it actually happening?
I've got to come in, because, you know, when the news broke yesterday afternoon, it was just, it blew up. I've been talking about Joshua versus Fury, I think, ever since I joined Lights Out Boxing, Faisal, and I think you must remember the conversation I've had with you about the fight. I think there's so many layers to this. I mean, first and foremost, we know about Daniel Kinahan. We know about the role he plays within Tyson Fury. Seeing the Panorama documentary, and you know, the role he plays. I doubt he's playing a role in this. Secondly, we know that the UK is set to come out of lockdown restrictions on the 21st of June. Which will hopefully see full attendance return to live sporting events. We also know that there'll be 2 fights. So ideally, the first one we'll be looking at the end of July, possibly, and the second one will be in Christmas around December time. Now, I can confidently say that, considering that vaccinations in the UK are on the rise, and you know, the rates of coronavirus are coming down, I can see the first fight taking place in the UK. You certainly don't think it will happen, Faisal, but I'm confident of that. And I think the second fight will take place in the Middle East, either Saudi Arabia or Qatar, where they will be advertising for the World Cup the year after. So that is my 2 cents. I think we are about to see history in the making. Wembley Stadium in July, Qatar in December. That is the fact.
I think we have to look. I mean, we can only go by what we know, and unfortunately, the pandemic is currently stopping all major sporting events well, it is still going ahead, but of course without large number of crowds. So we know that the FA Cup final, which is towards the end or middle of May, will be played in front of 20,000 fans. And we know that the Euros is likely to take place in the UK.
Exactly.
I mean, yeah, look, these are all positives, but because of how many backward steps the country has taken in terms of the pandemic, and of course going into lockdown on more than one occasion, and then from tiers 1 to 5, I can't see Wembley selling out a 90,000 seater stadium for this event anytime soon, unless it's at the back end of this year coming up. And I believe if these guys are making the money that we're reportedly reading, this has to be in front of a huge crowd. 20,000 is not going to pay what these guys are going to be earning for the money that they'll be receiving. I think minimum this fight will have to have a crowd attendance of 80 to 90,000 fans at least, just because of what these guys are earning. Yeah, you can talk about the promotional side of things, and of course what they'll be earning from agents or from managers, whatever, selling the fight. But I do believe the majority of the money does come from the gate, and these guys will. I just don't see the first fight happening in the UK. I'm an optimistic. I'd like to think it was going to happen in the UK, because ideally this fight should be happening in the UK. But again,
I agree.
the fight will go where the money is being offered. If you'd have said to me at the end of Joshua Ruiz won, the rematch is going to take place in Saudi Arabia, I'd have probably slapped you across the face. Not being bad or anything, but it's just how it was at the time. This fight will go where the big time players are. Joshua, Ron, your thoughts on where this fight is going and to what me and Luke have just said?
I mean, it was not long ago that you had an interview with Tyson Fury, who's I was fearing the worst, that he might be going back to his old ways, where he said he's stepping away from boxing at the moment. He's drinking his beers and that. And then well, if anyone knows how to sell a fight, is Tyson Fury. Sorry, I was referring to there. And great news that this might be happening again. So. I totally agree with you. Where I see this fight happening, I can't see it happening in the UK. The bookies are kind of saying the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Qatar. I think Luke was mentioned, in our conversation previously. He was saying about, Qatar being a venue. They might want to show to the world that they're going to be hosting the World Cup, so that could be an opportunity for them to kind of showcase what a spectacle they could put on. But put that all aside. This is our Rumble in the Jungle. This is our Thriller in Manila. The Americans have, they've been spoilt for choice. They've had these legends, like Ali, Foreman, Frazier, the best versus the best. And this is our time, as UK boxing fans, to experience that. This is unheard of. When's a lot. We've never had this for all the belts that between two of the elite fighters, 1 and 2, there was debate whether Deontay Wilder was, 1 or 2 or 3. That he's completely out of the question now. I don't know what happened with that rematch for that trilogy, but this is the fight that needs to be made, and I'm glad we're going in the right direction. But I'm still to be convinced. Will it go through will they get it over the line? Faisal, you said this fight will only happen when you hear that first bell go, when they're about to, start their fight.
Joshua, where do you stand on all of this? Where do you see the first fight taking place in, given today's current situation in the world?
Well, here's the thing, right? I do like Luke's theory. I really think that's a very sexy theory. Qatar. Honestly, when you think about it, it's really, really, it makes a lot of sense. There's a big event happening in Qatar. There's a bunch of money in Qatar. People can dish out whatever you want, right? To bring the fight there and kind of promote that way. However, Tyson Fury did sign with ESPN top rank Bob Arum. So I think ESPN being such a big platform in America, and the fact that they dished out so much money in order to pay Tyson Fury. If you remember, his deal was 5 fights for $100 million. they dished out $100 million for Tyson Fury to fight in the US and solely promote Tyson Fury. So I can certainly see, especially now, given the fact that the UK is in lockdown. But I agree with you in the sense that the UK makes perfect sense. You go to Wembley, I feel like if it's open, that's 100% the location you're going to have the fight. But as you know, coronavirus, you have the pandemic, the lockdown is going to be a severe hindrance to having that many fans, which, like you said, Faisal, you need fans in order to pay the fighters, right? That's why a lot of these guys aren't having these big fights, because if there's no live gate with interest, it's hard to generate the kind of money that you need in order to throw these fights. Because at the end of the day, I can say, hey, I'm going to pay you X, but if I'm not making that money at the gate, where am I going to get the money from? I mean, famously, Don King would promise these fighters these ridiculous sums of money, and then he would just like be like, hey, sorry, I didn't get paid enough. This is what you're getting paid instead. So I can see the first fight maybe being in the US, maybe Dallas Stadium, maybe Texas, Vegas. You have Florida now with the Hard Rock Cafe. You saw Canelo fought there. And DAZN does have that relationship with Miami, where they just had Canelo kind of promoting his thing. You have the T-Mobile Arena in Vegas. There's a bunch of good places that the fight could take place. But I think it has to be, in my opinion, I think it's the UK 100%. There has to be at least one fight.
Before we move on,
Joshua, can I just ask you a quick question?
Sure.
I mean, as you're a boxing, purist, you're a boxing fan yourself. How would the American public take to that? Big heavyweight fight, not an American in sight, but fighting for the titles is unheard of. What are your thoughts on that? Fighting on your home soil as well.
Here's the thing, right? When you look back at that Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder matchup, Deontay Wilder was the American. He was the heavyweight champ. Naturally, you would think people gravitate towards Wilder and that he would be the A side, the big name, the big attraction. But if you remember, Tyson Fury was the one that kind of sold that fight. He was the one at the press conferences calling Deontay Wilder Dasa and all these crazy things to kind of hype up the fight. He's the big personality. So I feel like the fact that Tyson Fury fights on such a big network like ESPN, a lot more people know Tyson Fury than, let's say, if a Deontay Wilder was fighting Anthony Joshua. Sure, there was a time where Wilder Joshua was the fight, but when Fury fought Joshua, he got up off the floor. You know his story. We know the mental health issues he had, the fact that he wanted to kill himself. He was overweight, came back, and he almost actually pulled off the upset. I actually thought he won the fight. I don't know how they gave that fight to Deontay Wilder. He did make an argument when he got dropped in the second time in the 12th round. But everyone remembers what? Tyson Fury getting up. Everyone remembers Tyson Fury dominating Deontay Wilder. So I think Fury and Joshua would sell plenty. They know who Anthony Joshua is. They know he comes from the other side. He's going to attract the UK fan base and the international fan base. I don't know how the traveling would go. I think that's my only big fear when it comes to making the fight in the US. You normally do have fans that will travel to the US to see it. I mean, look at Ricky Hatton and Floyd Mayweather.
Of course.
Everyone traveled to see that fight. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, at one point, I think Floyd Mayweather said there were more fans rooting for Ricky Hatton than him in his own hometown.
I just want to put on notice that, sorry to disturb you, Joshua.
Sure, no worries.
Tyson Fury was scheduled to fight at the end of December with no crowd. The fight did not happen with, so it was supposedly the German guy, Ajit Kabayel. The fight did not happen because they couldn't afford to pay Tyson Fury. There's no way that a crowd of 20,000 would be enough to cover Tyson Fury's earnings. There has to be at least minimum 70,000 over to forget Tyson Fury. Anthony Joshua is a global superstar as well. Okay. These guys don't fight for small change. They fight for big money. So, look, Luke, I'm with you on this one. I'd love to see the fight in Wembley. I'd love to see both fights in Wembley, or one in Wembley, one in Cardiff. Do it on British soil. But again, the sport is changing. Times are changing. Eddie Hearn is globally expanding boxing, which is a brilliant thing, I think. But again, you're only going to go with the money. And with today's situation, there are not many countries that are going to offer a gate, such as a Qatar, a Singapore, a China, or Dubai, or even America. So we've got to take all these things into consideration. Let's move on, because with the Fury Joshua thing we could talk about it all day long, but great news. Sorry, go for it, Josh.
But just one thing, maybe Eddie Hearn should have it in his backyard again, like that one time.
Hey, could work. Could work. But
Fight
again,
camp, baby. Fight camp.
There's a
Let's
lot
have
of
it.
money.
Yeah.
it's where that goes. But listen, that the 2-fight deal is signed. There'll be plenty more to cover in future podcasts about Fury Joshua. Let's move on and let's have a quick recap of Saturday night's war, an all-out war between Chocolatito and Juan Estrada. Joshua Saez, we start with you, mate. You've done a podcast, giving a preview to the fight. You watched the fight live. Just sum up what was another excellent fight between two warriors.
I mean, it was literally textbook inside fighting. A lot of people think the Mexican style kind of tempo to a fight is all action and no defense, no anything. In this fight, you saw good back and forth. You saw good high-level defense from both guys. You saw ebbs and flows of offense, defense, and transitioning between both. I thought it was a spectacular performance by both guys. I did favor Chocolatito, and I had mentioned that, but I also watched the fight. I think it was like midnight. I was kind of tired. So when they gave the fight to Estrada, I was kind of shocked in the sense that I thought Chocolatito was kind of en route to winning, and I thought he did win. But Estrada, upon rewatching it, it was a pretty close fight, especially based on those first 3 rounds. However you kind of scored those, that really dictated what happened. I don't think Chocolatito was robbed. A lot of people are like, oh, he got robbed. I don't think so. I think it was a good, close fight that could have gone either way, even though I did think Chocolatito still won the fight upon rewatching it. So it's one of those fights that you really can't make a robbery argument for either person, in my opinion.
It was a brilliant fight. It was a very close fight, and now they tied at 1-1. Juan Estrada now becomes a unified super flyweight champion, holding the WBA and the WBC titles. But again, controversy after the fight with Carlos Sucre's scorecard of 117 to 111. We understand that Carlos Sucre has now been suspended by the WBA. Guys, I mean, why is this still happening? You know, probably a contender for Fight of the Year gets more controversy because, I don't know, another judge decides to turn up and he has to, I don't know, it's just, it just makes you laugh. When is boxing going to learn its lesson? This cannot continue. Yes, the guy's been suspended, but the likelihood is he'll probably be officiating again soon.
Yeah.
What needs to be done?
Yeah.
It was never 117, 111. I mean, that fight was extraordinary. It was power, it was speed, it was agility. I mean, we've often said that, you know, the lower the weight class, the more agile and more of a pace of a fight you're going to get. And the way that Chocolatito and El Gallo was going at it was amazing. I personally had Chocolatito winning by a round across the 12 rounds, but you know, even that last 3 minutes was just amazing boxing to watch. And the way that he could score it, that divide 9 rounds to 3, no, not a chance.
Do you honestly believe that this current situation, which started off pretty much for the start of the year in boxing, going back to Eddie Hearn's first show, we've seen some controversial decisions. People say that Zelfa Barrett, Kiko Martinez was quite controversial, and then there's been a few others. But do you honestly believe that this issue that we're having in the sport will eventually get sorted? And do you think we can bring in perhaps another way of, I don't know, judging or scoring fights?
I think ultimately it comes down to how you score a fight in 3 minutes. I mean, you can look at how many punches are thrown and look at, okay, who had the upper hand in between rounds. But ultimately, we need a rule of thumb. And, you know, when the rule of thumb is that wide, you can't be doing it. Like, you've got to be bang on the money when you're officiating a world title fight. Let's not forget. It was ridiculous.
Great fight. Sorry, Ron, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with Luke. I mean, look, when we're watching a fight, yeah, I mean, just watch a fight, you know, with it being on mute, and then make a judgment on that. I think it's very subjective. You know, what are you scoring them on? You know, you're scoring them on attacking. Are you scoring on them on their defense? You know, are they a back foot fighter, front foot fighter? It just depends on what the judges, you know, value or what they prefer. Obviously, that was 117, 111, shocking, absolutely shocking. So something needs to be done about this. We've, that's what you mentioned in the UK. We've had some scorecards. I mean, the one I'm thinking of is the recent Lewis Ritson fight. Was it Vasquez that he fought? Yeah, again, that was horrendous as well. There's a fight that on Eddie Hearn's card, and Eddie Hearn, is that the Zelfa Barrett one? Is it?
That is, yeah.
Where Eddie Hearn, as his promoter, actually came out and blasted the scoring as well. So that's, as boxing fans, promoters, we just want to see the right arm being raised at the end of the fight, regardless if it's an upset or not. We just want to see the correct decision being made. And there was an argument for either or, who could have won that fight, Estrada, or Chocolatito. But it's a shame that we're talking about these decisions, these points when we should be focusing on the fight and talking about how great of a spectacle it is. But
it was a phenomenal fight, a brilliant fight, and again, unfortunately, one guy decides to add controversy to it. What me personally would love to see right now, after every fight that goes to a points decision, I'd love to see these judges give a report on why they scored each round in a certain way. I would love to see, and I would love to read that as well. I think a lot of these days, most judges are going towards the aggressor, but not many judges are going towards clean shots landed. Joshua, you covered the fight before the fight with your podcast, which I listened to. Do we see a third fight?
I think it makes sense, truthfully. The buzz, the controversy, it's gonna sell. People are gonna talk about it. People are gonna rewatch the fight. One thing about, especially here in America, like a lot of people miss the fight, right? Like a lot of people won't watch it. But when they hear, oh, did you watch Chocolatito versus Estrada? Go watch it on the Zone. They'll watch it, rewatch, and be like, wow, that was a war. And the rematch will always, the trilogy or the third fight in this case would probably be a fight that everyone's going to watch based on the fact that both fights right now were good. So far, we haven't had a dud of a fight. Sure, the first one was a little more one-sided towards Chocolatito, but this second fight, you can't sit here and say that Chocolatito dominated. It wasn't a blowout. I did have one thing I wanted to kind of interject on about potentially with scoring, and it's kind of controversial because boxing, part of the whole experience is the judges are in the crowd, they're part of the whole event, and they're there, they're watching what's going on. I did have a proposal that maybe the judges should be in a place where they can watch the fight, where they're away from the crowd, and we have like a camera where you're seeing them score, and then they could actually get a clearer version of what they're watching. Because as you know, when you watch a fight live, things look a lot more one-sided, in my opinion, especially if the crowd's like yelling. For in this case, it would be Estrada because it was a pro-Mexican crowd. It was in Texas. You saw there were more fans for Estrada, and maybe that influenced the judges. You hear all the screaming because Estrada threw a lot of punches, but maybe that influenced them. I don't know, but I think the judges should be separate from the crowd. Maybe be in a room somewhere where you have an official from the commission watching, or we can see how they're scoring more or less like via camera. We'll still be surprised when the judge, like the rulings made. Like, I don't like open scoring, in my opinion. Like it's cool in concept, but it kind of takes away from that drama. But I thought maybe take the crowd away from the judges. They won't be influenced by the yelling and the screaming, and they could actually see what we see on television, because a lot of the times we have the best perspective.
So I totally agree. Yeah, I totally agree with Josh. I think I like that idea, being away from it, not getting sucked in by the emotions of the crowd and trying to egg on their fighter. It's a bit like a VAR kind of situation. They're in a little separate.
No. Don't mention VAR.
I'm using that concept. I'm not saying, they're not they're in a little separate room. They're not by the pitch side. Really am in favor of it. And I like that, first of what you said about interviewing scorecard, the judges, and saying, tell us why you gave these scores. Talking of that, I'd love to hear the judges that scored the Roy Jones Jr. final in the Olympics.
Oh man,
I'd love to.
There's plenty.
You know what I
There's,
mean?
there's plenty. We'd love to get, look. We'd love to
That
get
would be the
plenty of
one I would
reports on
love
plenty of
to, I could
fights.
rewind back.
Sure.
But look, I mean, either way, great fight. Do
Yeah.
it again, please, Eddie Hearn. He said it was the best fight he's ever seen live. We'd love to see him do it for a third and final time, just without dodgy judges officiating the fight. Final topic. It was announced on Sunday afternoon that Demetrius Andrade, the boogeyman, will defend his WBO middleweight championship in Miami against Liam Williams. Gonna give this first question to fellow British reporter Luke Anthony Walsh. Will the dragon be slayed, or will the dragon reign supreme in Miami come April 17th?
The Welsh dragon is coming for that title, and his time has come. Liam Williams has been on the rise. Yes, he had those 2 losses in 2017 against Liam Smith, which, you know, he was well beaten. It was a different time for Liam Williams. But ever since he's fought his way back up, obviously winning the British titles, he performed in October at the BT Sports Studios, an amazing knockout win against Andrew Robinson, and now his time is now his first time fighting outside of Europe in the States against Demetrius Andrade, who, you know, we've all said before was very much awarded the title in 2018. And has not really had a serious challenger to face against it. He last fought in January last year. So obviously Liam Williams has more of the experience coming into it. But yeah, it should be an amazing fight. But I've got Liam Williams all the way. I think his time is now.
Joshua, just how big is Andrade in America? You know, is he a big name, and does he deserve to have that WBO middleweight title, especially after the whole incident with Billy Joe Saunders and the whole nasal spray kind of episode?
I mean, truthfully, look, Andrade, you look at him, he's a tall lefty, he's tricky, he knows how to box on his back foot, he's very careful, doesn't take a lot of risks, but he can counter punch, and if he gets the opportunity, he most likely will take it. If he hurts you, he'll finish you, right? But for the most part, he doesn't take a lot of risks. He hasn't fought anyone of, in my opinion, someone substantial. His resume is, let's be honest, it's kind of lackluster. I mean, he hasn't really fought anyone. And the one guy he was supposed to fight ended up testing positive or whatever with the nasal spray, like you said. I was looking forward to that fight. I'm a big Billy Joe fan, and I was looking forward to him testing himself against Andrade because I want to see what Andrade's about. I always hear about how the Charlos are ducking Andrade, or Daniel Jacobs is ducking, Canelo's ducking Andrade, and I'm like, why would they duck this guy? He hasn't fought anyone. And even as I had mentioned before on my podcast a while ago, you look at a highlight film of this guy and it's boring. So like, I don't get what the hoopla is. He's talented for sure, but his resume doesn't add up to all the hype. And I think if this guy comes and catches him off guard, he hasn't fought in a while, he has a shot. And truthfully, it would probably be a little better if he did shock Andrade.
Ron, Williams going into this fight being the away fight on an American turf, is the advantage already with Andrade?
Yeah, absolutely. He's coming on to his home turf. He's defending. You know, he has to do something significant to prove to the judges that he walks away with the title. You know, it's a big ask for him. You know, he's at a good age in his career. He's 28. You know, he's only got those 2 defeats on his record against, you know, I mean, that's no disservice to him. He's lost against, you know, a world level operator in Liam Smith, was it Liam Smith that he lost that he lost to? So, and Liam Smith himself has been in with some good fighters himself. So, look, this is, if there's any time where he's going to really stand up and announce himself in that middleweight division, it is now. You know, he gets that world title fight, it opens doors. You know, there's so many potential fights there. You know, there's the Golovkins, there's Canelo, there's Billy Joe Saunders. If he wants to fight Chris Eubank Jr. in Britain for that world title, you know, I mean, this is his great opportunity here, and you know, I wish him all the best. You know, I can see Josh makes a good point about who has Andrade beaten. You know, I like Andrade, but he has a point there, and I can't really argue against that.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean, it's worth pointing out, of course, they fight on the 17th of April. Of course, Canelo against Billy Joe Saunders happens 2 weeks after. If we were to fantasy book and say the winner of both fights to meet each other later on in the year, who would you say coming out on top and being an undisputed middleweight champion of the world?
I don't know. I mean, I think obviously
No, I wouldn't put Liam.
Golovkin
No,
would have
I wouldn't
something to
put
say
Liam
about that
Williams
as well.
in that category just yet, because there's a lot of other people well ahead of him. No disrespect to him. Even if he does win that world title, there's better fights out there for Canelo. You know, he's a cash cow, and he can take his pick.
Let's get a prediction. April 17th. I'm going to give my prediction. I think Liam Williams is going to knock out Demetrius Andrade. Guys, your prediction?
100% Liam Williams knockout.
Joshua?
As much as I would actually like a shakeup in the division, because after a while you get tired of hearing someone being such a big bad boogeyman. But I think Andrade, he's going to be safe. He's going to do what he does. He's going to frustrate Liam. And I can't see Andrade losing this fight. I mean, if it happens, I wouldn't be totally upset at it. But for the most part, I got to roll with Andrade. He's too slick, too tall, and yeah, unfortunately, I think Andrade is going to just win a probably close decision. It'll look tough for a while, but he'll pull away.
Ron?
I'm going for Boo Boo.
Enough.
Yeah, I just think maybe he's a bit more experienced. I just think he's he's going to win that. But good luck to Liam Williams. He does it, mate. Then the world's his oyster. And,
I think the last point we've got to say, and we talked about officiating earlier, is that if Liam Williams goes and knocks him out, he wins. If it goes all the way, then the argument can be said that the refereeing will be lenient to the American. But we've got to back Liam Williams all the way. This is his time is now.
May I say one thing really quick?
Go for it.
From Eddie Hearn's perspective, who do you think? What would it be more beneficial for Andrade to keep winning and always hear like, hey, everyone's ducking Andrade, no one wants to fight him, and he just doesn't fight anybody? Or would it just be better for Williams just to knock Andrade off, and then you could kind of just forget about him in the argument?
Well, he's making an announcement, isn't he? If he knocks him out, and then Eddie Hearn's rubbing his hands together and thinking, what potential British fights he could make.
True.
It's we've got two really good, in my opinion, some really good potential. I mean, obviously world-class level in Billy Joe Saunders. We've got Chris Eubank Jr., who's just itching for a world title, an actual proper world title fight. So,
either way, listen, it's a fight that's not far off. So it's something we've got to look forward to in the middleweight division. And there's plenty of doors that open for the winner. Golovkin, the Charlos, Eubank, perhaps they might even fancy moving up to 168. But listen, time will tell. And that's all we've got time for on podcast 29 of the Lights Out Boxing podcast. Ron and Luke, pleasure as always, and a massive shout out to the Good Boxing Podcast founder, Joshua Saez, for joining us. We'll be sharing their links in the description. And if you haven't already, please make sure you hit that subscribe button, like and follow on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And don't forget to check out the Good Boxing Podcast social media as well. We'll be sharing their links in our description. I'm Faisal Khan, your host, and thank you for listening to podcast 29 of the Lights Out Boxing podcast.